Hey folks, thanks for joining us. Today we have a special guest, Matthew Reagan, who's going to be my amazing co-host for the Interactive and Immersive Championship coming up this weekend. And we wanted to have a little bit of fun, talk about a few questions that we're getting asked about the championship, and just to tell our thoughts and what we're excited about, because it's not just you guys that's excited. Everyone's excited. We're excited. We're super pumped. So thank you for joining us, Matthew.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
No problem, my friend. I think it's if I was a broken record, I'm going to say it's going to be a lot of fun, like a lot, because I think it's true. And maybe that's a good place. I think it's a good place to start is, why did you want to be a part of this? Why were you excited to kind of join in?
Oh my God. It's such a strange thing to be sitting here now and be thinking about how I've been working with TouchDesigner for 7 years, almost 8 years, and kind of like thinking about the fact that I'm getting close to my decade of time having worked with this environment, having been working with this environment, and to see how much it's grown has been exciting, but to be able to see other people using it is also like the most bizarre and exciting feeling. Because it used to be that like you'd work with this thing and like everyone would be like, what is that? I don't even understand what you're doing. And for it to have like crossed a tipping point where now it's like a thing that people recognize and that we get to celebrate and like look at and laugh about and cheer about, that's really inspiring. And it feels like we've really come a long way in the years that I've been kind of participating in the community and making. It
is funny. Do you remember the first time you saw somebody else's network? Because for me, I remember it was 2 or 3 years before I saw somebody else's network for real. Like after I made a project or two, and then I was working with somebody else and I looked at their project, I'm like, oh my God, like, wow, this is a thing. Where was I when this was happening?
Oh man, that's a really great point. Like, I feel like I trolled around in the forums a lot. I was in the help group a lot, but like before I saw like a file that like I'd actually worked with someone in person with was probably like 3 or 4 years. And then I was like, you use this in a totally different way than I do. This is weird. I'm like, okay, great. Let me try to like wrap my head around where you've put things and how you've organized things and why are your nodes so big and why are these so small? And I hate
why are there colors everywhere? How did you add the colors? Where did the colors come from?
Oh man.
And I think that's an interesting thing for me, because I guess that's one of the reasons why we wanted to be part of this and put this on was, to your point, I think the community's come so far from these silos, these lone rangers all around the world that have never talked to each other, never met, never even seen each other's work. And now we're at this point where there's a thriving community, everyone's sharing stuff. There's many people doing live streams and YouTube content, everything, right? Like campfire chats, the gamut of the community has grown so much that we thought, it would be really fun to have that same feeling of like, watch all of your favorite pros, watch your buddies, watch everyone work live and see all of that happening. And, the ups and downs of it are going to be real. I mean, I know myself when I'm working on a project, sometimes I'm like, I got this nailed. 10 minutes later, I'm wondering why I'm still working on the first line of code for this thing. And I think that's going to be like a really fun and interesting thing for me.
Well, I always, it's interesting having made tutorials and then watched other people's tutorials. Like, you always cut out the parts where you're like scratching your head and trying to figure out why that for loop isn't working or why those operators like, oh, that's broken. And like, I always think about the fact that like, no one wants to watch me like struggle bus for 10 minutes as I, realize that I've like connected the operators in the wrong order. But this is a kind of experience and event where we're really going to watch people have those exact moments where it's like things go accidentally right and accidentally wrong. And then someone's like frantically searching in their network for why it's broken or why it's fixed.
And I think that's going to be compounded by the fact that competitors won't know the specifics of the challenge till right before the challenge starts. So it'll almost be the realest thing you've seen. Because to your point, like especially, when I'm making workshops, when we're all making workshops, we want it to be clean, concise, well-produced. If I'm doing a take and I run into exactly what you're saying, I plugged the things in the backwards and, I just cut the take and do it again. And in this live competition, there's not going to be any cut and takes. You got to scramble to pick up the pace and get back to where you need to be.
It reminds me of my theater days when we'd be working on shows and you'd be, the director would change their mind kind of like mid tech, and then all of a sudden they'd be like, I need to see a new look. And you're like, okay. Give me a hint. Is it blue? Is it warm? Is it fuzzy? It feels sad, but it's exciting. And let me just like see if I can rearrange these things fast enough to like get to something that feels right enough so we can keep going.
And I guess this is an interesting question is, why is this like an important thing to do, or why is it an interesting thing to do? And I know from our personal kind of, rationale behind it is it really goes back to community. I think we're kind of at the turning point for the TouchDesigner community in particular, and not even that, but once you start thinking about the bigger communities, and Notch community especially is growing really quickly. I always tell people, like, when they're looking at their business and thinking about, how do you get in this industry? I say, well, look at the infrastructure around you. If there are libraries, that means people like reading books. It's as simple as that. And I think we're starting to get to the point now where, there's YouTube channels, there's Twitch channels, there's events, there's summits, there's conferences, there's competitions. Like, this isn't the just starting industry that we started in like 7, 8, 9 years ago or before. This is a real industry. There's infrastructure around it. And I think that was one of the interesting things for us was, now that we're at this point, how do we help contribute to this overall industry infrastructure by adding another element to it that, it doesn't go down the road of gigs, doesn't go down the road of education, but, shine spotlights on cool artists, bring interesting companies into the mix as sponsors and supporters of the industry. Maybe they then see something that they like inside the competition, they hire somebody. So that was kind of like the interesting angle for us, was this idea of the infrastructure of the industry is now, I think, at a point where it's going to keep growing. And I'm sure we're not going to be the last ones to do a competition, or the first ones even. I know there's other folks who have done similar kind of more offline versions of the competitions, but taking it to an online and live place, I think, is the fun and interesting part for us.
Well, it's so interesting because I think, exactly to your point, like, having seen how much we've grown and shifted is a big part of this. Like, the fact that there's a large enough community and a large enough body of people that are excited to participate, that we can even hold a festival like this in the first place, a championship like this, is like, I wouldn't have believed this was possible, 3 years ago. And the fact that we're sitting this now where it's like, oh, there's not only enough people, there's enough talented, incredibly excited, engaged people to be able to just like rip through the challenges that are going to be in front of them is a huge kind of mesmerizing turning point, in my opinion. The thing that's like, I find really exciting and interesting about this is that to me, it feels like there's a tipping point in our relationship between real-time rendering techniques and kind of traditional made media techniques that are all offline, are baked on big server farms, are like, sure, like, that's going to take 3 weeks to render, but the water is going to look perfect. Like, okay, that's great. But what if the water doesn't need to be perfect, and we're looking for a quick iteration? And what does it mean to really kind of on your feet put together a look that you can stand around and say, oh, is this right or is this wrong? Or how can we pivot and think about this differently? The speed of development and how quickly you can make new looks, make interesting, exciting, engaging pieces that are both rendered and from an interactivity perspective, I think is one of the pieces that drew all of us to TouchDesigner. And I think this is an opportunity to really kind of show that off and build some more momentum around why that's an important and kind of game-shifting transition in our industry. It's like, thinking of the world as, our assets as having to only be rendered is slipping away from us. And we can really start to think about what are the real-time rendered directions that we can explore for future gigs, events, installations, experiences, you name it.
I won't say it's an official goal to convert, C4D users and Maya users and all but I think a healthy byproduct of how fun the events will be and how real and live and showing like exactly what you're saying, the idea that somebody can hop into a software and make something amazing in like half an hour with no render time, and it's running and it's interactive. I think that's going to like blow a lot of people's minds that aren't already in the industry, because I think it's going to be a fun event for everyone to watch. I think that's pretty... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, you go, sir.
Well, I was just going to say, I think it's, the way we've designed the challenges is interesting because we have them point in a specific direction, but they're open enough where people can really dig into their own creativity and kind of add their own flair to it and their own spin to it, and almost, take that direction. And if they swerve a little bit this way and that way, it's almost encouraged. There's no like strict guidelines except for like the few small rules of the challenges. And I think that's an exciting thing for me. But I wanted to know, like, what are you expecting to see that will be exciting out of competitors once they have this, freedom to go down a road?
I always felt like when I was teaching in-person classes, we do assignments, or we do challenges at the beginning of class sometimes that were copy art exercises, where like I give you a reference GIF, and then we take the first 20 minutes of class, and like you come up with a way to mimic that exact look, and then we'd go around and share like, okay, how did you get there? And what was always so interesting to me was that, pretty consistently people in the class would be able to achieve the look without a big problem, but how they got there was wildly different. And the kind of creativity and approach that comes out of how people think and navigate working with touch is always so interesting and always kind of head scratching for me. I feel like I learn more from watching things like this than people have learned from any of the materials that I've made, because I'm like, oh, I would not have thought to use those operators in that order. Or, that's not very efficient, but like the idea that you have there is so curious. I bet there's a way to take advantage of that. So I always feel like these kinds of things become really inspiring and exciting, because you see a whole different set of perspectives for solving problems, thinking creatively on your feet, making a choice that might not be the most performant, but is performant enough for the task. I think it's easy for a lot of us who have been doing this a long time to say, oh, well, that particular effect is too hard, it's going to be too expensive, or we can't think about it, because we know all the challenges that are associated with it. But we don't give ourselves a chance to just like try the inefficient way of doing it to see if it'll work before we commit to finding a better way to do it.
I think that's an interesting one, because I think that's also what I'm very excited for. Is I want to see people bend and break TouchDesigner a little bit. And I think when you're going to combine the factor that there's going to be some pretty clear direction they have to go in, just a very few small number of restrictions, but then a time limit, right? Exactly to your point, like maybe you don't have time to do things the proper way, and you're going to have to think on your feet. And, I always think back, we had Paqueta 12 on the stream a little while ago, and he's like the top master, right? Like, what can't he do with tops? And I want to see people bring out like crazy techniques, like, oh, what, you're using chops to do what? Like, you're working this whole thing in DAT tables? Like, what? I think that's going to be a really funny, like, yeah, you're doing math in SOPs? Like, what? I think that's going to be probably what I'm going to be most excited about, is seeing people going down these roads, and obviously like trying to make the best end result from each challenge. But then also the idea that like, how are they going to get there? I think is a really fun thing. And the fact that we get to watch all of these people do it live, and then me and you have the pleasure of commentating and just looking over them, and we're going to have guest judges, which is going to be really fun because their opinions are going to be probably different than mine or yours. I think that's probably like the most thing I'm looking forward to seeing, is how far people, because I even, I like going back to the first question where you're saying like, when was the first time you saw somebody else's project? I would almost say that every time I've seen somebody else's project, I've thought to myself, wow, you did what with what? Like, I've never thought of that before. And okay. This is going to, I think, be a bit of a crash course in that, because we're going to see all these people giving us that all stream long, which might be like a really, really crazy amount of fun for me.
I'm really curious. I was just talking with Zoe the other day about this, and like, I remember when I started working with TouchDesigner, and there were a few less kind of guardrails around the application, and you could pretty easily crash without trying too hard. I think there was one project I worked on where on average, I crashed touch probably like 10 or 12 times a day. I just would like run out of memory because I wasn't being careful. And so, that taught me a lot of really clear habits about when do I save, how often do I save, as well as like, what's my memory usage? Am I keeping a clear eye on my stats? So I'm really curious to see, are people gonna hit obstacles or challenges where they're like crash, 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 or are they gonna be able to navigate around those? I feel like I've had the same problems not problems. I've had the same experience with Notch where it's like, oh, okay, I'm going to try this thing. Oh, I crashed. All right. I'm going to change my registry key about my memory management. Okay, fine. And I crashed again. Okay, fine. And I think we take for granted sometimes that that's part of our process. That's part of the process with working with any of these real-time tools, is like understanding how to navigate the hidden fragility of computer systems. So I'm curious to see how people will navigate that, how they'll kind of come back from those moments. How often will people save? I think that end of it is going to be really interesting.
The how often people will save will be pretty funny. We might even have to get some kind of metric every time somebody hits Control S. It pops up on screen, this person is saved. Because it was funny, I was having a conversation probably yesterday on stream also, very similar, which was that, both in case of Touch and Notch, back in the day, maybe we could say, it was going to crash and it would do all these crazy stuff. And like what you were saying, there's less guardrails. And I think we've come so far down this road now where I feel like both apps don't crash unless I do something, which is interesting to think about because I think it just highlights how free and open the tools are, right? It's like a Swiss Army knife, but the tools can like go all the way around the handle. So you just got to be careful. Like, how far are you, you're opening the bottle opener, like how far are you opening it all the way? Like, oh, cool. But you have a cool, right? You have a cool use if you open it all the way around. And I think that's an interesting thing that I kind of realized yesterday was that, we're at this point where, we're talking about TouchDesigner and Notch specifically, but all the other apps included, where these apps are strong enough where they give you so much freedom that you're kind of the only person who can crash yourself at this point, which I think is a really interesting. It goes back to just how far the industry has come, right? I mean, before, to your point, sometimes you would just click something and the whole computer would blue screen and you're like, what happened? So I think with that said, thank you for your time, my friend. I'm really looking forward to this weekend. Oh, but you got something secret.
I got one question for you though.
You got a question for me? Uh-oh.
Yeah. I want to know. I want you to remind me what the prizes are and why you're excited about giving out these prizes. Why they're going to be a big deal? Because I think they're a big deal.
I think they're a pretty big deal. I can't remember the last time in my memory over my whole career where there was something I could have done to get anywhere near any of these kind of prizes. Like, I think there's a common misconception that, when we get to our level, we don't pay for licenses and stuff, which is, I think, crazy. Like, we pay for our own licenses because we're just regular members of the community, right? We're not like on a pedestal by any stretch. And I had wished all over the years of my career that there was something like this where I could go down, throw down, show my skills, show that I'm worthy of getting some more tools, more resources to do my work. And it's really cool because, I can give a special thanks to our sponsors, Derivative and Notch, for really making this possible. But they have come and brought us some really amazing prizes. First place gets TouchDesigner commercial license with a dongle, Notch Pro Builder license, custom trophy, a bunch of extra hardware that we have in the prize pool. Second place also gets TouchDesigner commercial with a dongle, gets a Notch Base Builder license. Third place also gets Notch Base Builder, TouchDesigner commercial. Like, can you imagine if we were, still in our young 20s and someone was like, hey, come join this thing for free. Oh. You could be walking away with thousands of dollars in licenses.
Oh my God.
I think that's amazing. Like, I'm so happy that I can, even though I never had that chance, that I can now give that chance to a bunch of other people to come up, step up, show your skills, flex a bit, have fun, and have this opportunity to like walk away with prizes. It's super cool. It's super cool for me.
I agree. I think it's going to be really exciting. I think that's, we want to see people not only have a chance to show off, but be able to take what they, take those prizes and then make something really interesting and fascinating, right? Like, I think about that transition point for me from when I went from just using the non-commercial license to using the commercial license. And I was like, oh my God, like, what do you mean? Like, I can render it something at any resolution I want. Like that.
Literally any resolution. We're like, oh my God, what?
Right. So it's a really exciting turning point, I think. And I'm really excited that people will have an opportunity to make some of those discoveries and then make really interesting and cool work with it after the fact.
I think so too. I'm super excited. I'm super excited not only for the event, but also for you to be a part of it, for us to host it, for our guest judges to help us judge, for all the competitors to fight in the octagon for us, for everyone's pleasure and for the chance of glory and prizes and getting their work out there. I think everybody wins. It should be a really amazing event. So thank you again for joining me, my friend. I really look forward to this weekend. If you're just checking this out and this is news to you, surprise. If it's not news to you, don't forget, Saturday, July 11th, 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern on our Twitch channel. Links will be in the descriptions. Also, Saturday, July 25th, 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern. Tune in. It's gonna be something special. It's gonna be something special.
That's gonna be great.